Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing this part of your Valentine's Day with us. My name is Gail Reynolds. I'm the current chapter president, and I have a couple of announcements to make before we get started. One is a field trip this coming Saturday, February 19th at 11 a.m. We're meeting at the DeWitt Cabin parking lot off of State Route 73, excuse me, to walk around some of the natural areas, the Reuter Preserve Boardwalk. You can always find details of our programs and our field trips on our website, audubonmv.org. The other announcement, and this will take place over this coming weekend, 4 days, is the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is a really fun citizen science event. It's been sponsored by National Audubon, and Cornell Lab of Ornithology is involved. You don't have to be an expert at all, but the point is to do a limited count. Go on the website, put it in, and then all of the results are tabulated. The easiest way to get to the website, and I just checked it out, was just birdcount.org, and it'll give you all the information and forms and give you an eBird account if you need one. So that's really fun, and we'll be talking about that on our field trip on Saturday too. So with that, I'm going to thank everyone for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Gladish, who will introduce our speaker tonight, who has a little Valentine theme. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, good evening. Our presenter tonight is Wendi Van Buren, Ohio Department of Natural Resources Urban Forester for Southwest Ohio. Her territory covers 14 counties from Shelby County down to Adams County. She helps cities and townships develop and operate their tree programs and obtain grants to support those programs. She provides community officials and staff with management information and advice to help them maintain their healthy public green infrastructure in their communities. She also conducts educational outreach programs, such as the Ohio Tree Commission Academy, where she teaches all sorts of folks about the basics of tree maintenance and health and so on. She's worked for the Ohio Natural Resources Department in this capacity for 18 years. And before that, she worked on a city crew for Cincinnati's urban forestry program. A little background, she grew up in Englewood, Ohio. I have to specify Ohio because we have an Englewood in California where I came from. She earned a BS in environmental and plant biology from Ohio University. And I thought, interestingly, a minor in ancient Greek and archaeoethnobotany. I love that. She now lives in Glendale, just north of Cincinnati, with her family and her orange cat named Jack. And she wants me to emphasize that she really loves trees. Okay, so the title of tonight's talk is TREElations, Won't You Be My Valentine? It's all yours.
All right.
Wendi.
Let me know when it pops up so I know it's Sharon. It's looking good.
You're
looks perfect, Wendi. You're good to go.
So this is my sense of humor, sadly enough. TREElationships. I figure you're spending your Valentines with me, and you can be my Valentine just for the next hour. And yes, I do love trees very much. And I was thinking about Valentine's Day, and I was thinking about trees, and I thought red buds are the perfect symbolic Valentine's Day tree because, you know, Eastern redbud, it's native, it's got heart-shaped leaves, and And it's this lovely pink purpley color that, you know, we've seen all over the place today. I just thought, you know, this should be a tree that everyone sees and knows and is able to identify, and might even, you know, have one in your yard. It's a great replacement for removing honeysuckle. You might not know this, but the pink flowers are edible, and is one of my favorite things to do is pick a couple off and sprinkle them on my salad in the spring. They don't actually taste like much, but it's always fun to eat things out of your yard. Or maybe that's just me. It's a great tree for pollinators, and, you know, in the spirit of Valentine's Day, is very giving. It fixes nitrogen in the soil. It's a legume. It's in the bean family, and so it improves the soil. So, you know, between the heart-shaped leaves, the pink color, and the very giving nature of the tree, you know, giving nitrogen to the soil, I thought we should start off on that note. I wanted to put it out there that me just talking for an hour isn't a whole lot of fun. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And Alex said that she would, you know, interrupt me and ask those questions as she reads them. And I'm happy to take those questions, make this more of a discussion rather than a lecture. So I just thought I'd talk to you a little bit about trees and ways that they relate to things and each other, and hopefully teach each and every one of you one or two new things. So trees are really cool. You know, I'm slightly biased, but they're really very neat. They show love for each other in ways that is different than we humans show love for each other. You may not know this, but you've probably seen this if you've hiked through the woods, that trees can actually grow into each other. And not only the same species, but different species. They can connect. And there's a particular tree at Cecil Creek State Park where my office is, where the bottom of the beech tree is actually broken off. A hickory next to it has this connection and is keeping the whole beech tree alive. And it's just fascinating that, you know, trees can do this. And I thought, how appropriate for tree relationships. Trees also avoid growing into each other's branches. You know, sometimes I talk to people like, I don't want to plant trees too close because I don't want them to touch. But they actually have a natural ability to avoid overcrowding each other, and they share sunlight. It's called crown shyness. So crown shyness is what you see as you walk in the woods with understory trees and canopy trees, and how they all crisscross but don't quite touch. Trees are made to grow together. They're supposed to be near each other and touch like that. So, you know, the way our yards are with, you know, polka dot trees is not actually how trees in Ohio are biologically made to grow. They're made to grow in the woods. To look something like this, where they all grow, they touch, but they leave space for each other. It's actually pretty amazing. Trees do a lot for all sorts of living things. They connect with other things and make them better. So you may not know this, but trees actually have relationships with people. They have relationships with animals and pollinators, with other trees, lichens, soil, with water, with our climate. There are all sorts of ways that trees relate to other things and really make them better. For wildlife, they offer shelter and they offer food. Trees are really important with supporting wildlife, and without trees, we wouldn't have the wildlife that we enjoy here in Ohio. There's a number of keystone trees, and I got these numbers out of Doug Ptolemy's books. But I'm not going to get too far into it. If you really want to know, pick up some of Doug's books. But just the number of species supported by these different trees is shocking and beautiful and amazing, from caterpillars to bugs to mammals. You know, trees really can support a lot of wildlife. So oak trees are the winners, the Olympics, the gold medalists. They support the most number of species. But there's other trees that do really good too. Black cherries, they're not very big trees, but they support so many species. Birch trees, from river birch, to sweet birch, all the different birch trees, they support over 400 species. Maple trees support over 200. I mean, there's so many living things out there that couldn't do what they do if we don't have those trees. Elm trees support over 200. So, planting a nice diversity of large canopy trees is really important for all the things living around us. So now we're going to get into parts where I often get a few questions, and you're welcome to ask. I'll do my best. And that's that trees communicate and share nutrients through the roots and with those in need. What's funny is I just watched a Magic School Bus cartoon episode on this exact topic. It was pretty fabulous. It told the story really well. We jokingly call it the wood wide web. So the trees, they share water and nutrients through their root networks. And one of the things that we say in ODNR Forestry is that trees aren't what you see on top. They're actually what's on bottom. And as the tree goes on bottom is how the tree will go on top. Trees actually live in the ground, and then what we see above ground is the result. So, most of the time when people ask me questions about the health or happiness of the tree, you always look in the soil first. And the reason for it is exactly like this picture, that there's a whole lot going on underground. Trees share water and nutrients through those networks, and they use their roots to communicate, from distress signals about drought or disease, or possible insect attacks, or animals eating the leaves. So other trees can alter their behavior when they receive these messages. And it's through mycorrhizae networks, through fungus. It's just really fascinating. With my botany degree, I took a number of mycology classes, and the neat thing about mycology, fungus, is that mushrooms are actually biologically more similar to us than plants. They're made up of the same, chemicals, and use the same antivirals to be healthy and so on. So it's just really fascinating how everything is so connected. But not all tree relationships are friendly. Some trees are competitive. I think black walnuts are a little bit notorious for this. People know that you don't put black walnut trees near your vegetable garden. And that's because they produce a toxin called juglin that can inhibit the growth of sensitive plants near the roots of the tree, sometimes even killing them. And the reason why black walnuts do this is because they want all the water and nutrients in the soil for them, and they want to reduce that competition. Black walnuts are beautiful trees. They have big compound leaves with 15 to 23 leaflets. And there's a smell to walnuts, whether we're talking about the leaves or the hulls of the walnuts, but it smells really strong. They also have this very cute monkey face leaf scar that I often use for doing tree ID with kids out in the woods because it's very noticeable. It doesn't look like anything else. And there's a chambered pith, which is a very good ID technique for black walnuts or any of the juglans. And of course, eating walnuts is super yummy. There's your monkey face bud, which helps you know that you're looking at a walnut. The leaflet and the walnut, with the hull on it before, you break it open and eat the nut. The chambered pith, I remember, is one of the first things I learned about trees. Was I was a kid at Allwood Audubon, and we were doing a maple sugar walk in the winter, probably this time of year. And the naturalist that was taking us for a walk broke off a branch of the walnut and created a style to pound into a sugar maple. With the chambered pith, he just scraped it out and carved it. So it was a style, which is the tube that gets the sugar maple sap to come out. And I just remember thinking that was just the neatest thing ever. And, here I am all these decades later, still talking about trees. So even though some trees have allelopathic toxins, many more trees offer people and other animals things that we need to live. We wouldn't have the quality of life if we didn't have trees around. And one of these is one of my favorite trees. It's a pawpaw tree. It's I think it's our state fruit tree. It's one of our only native fruit trees. They were still really popular well into the mid 1900s and can grow here, can grow all over Ohio. That can grow in the sun. I know it has a reputation for growing in the shade, but it can grow in the shade as well. I would love to see more pawpaws planted out in our neighborhoods. So pawpaws are phenomenal. They have large fruits that are edible. You peel off the skin, and they have this sweet sort of custardy flavor on the inside. I most often eat them raw, but if anyone's curious on a nice pawpaw bread recipe, I think I have a pawpaw pie, pawpaw pudding, not pudding, but like British pudding. I have a couple recipes if anyone's interested. You can also use the bark for making rope for fishing, or Native Americans used them for moccasins, making baskets. It's really kind of flexible and easy to use. It was a very important tree. And then the seeds can be ground to repel insects. So, there's so many things that trees offer people. So here are some pictures of the pawpaw. If you haven't fallen in love yet, I think these pictures will help you. From the beautiful flower to the awesome golden fall color. The tree on your left is the shape of a tree when it's out in full sun. So it looks, more like a traditional tree. Out in the shade of a woods, it's going to be much more spindly and sparse. The fruit, those are fruit cut in half with the black seeds and the very large, tropical looking leaves. It's just a really beautiful, beautiful tree. So Alex, I see some chat questions. Are there questions?
No questions yet, Wendi. I just sent out the link for your Instagram account there, Ohio Tree ID.
Thank you.
Yeah, but everyone, please feel free to place any questions you have here in the chat, and I'll be sure to ask Wendi when I see any.
Great. Okay, so the other part of trees and people is that not only do they, physically help us, they give us clean air and oxygen and shade and clean our water. They do these nice environmental things, but studies have shown that people are happier and healthier when they're around trees. Um, trees make people feel more connected. So when you have trees in a space, they change the way people feel about that space for the better. And not all trees are the same, and their characteristics will make a place feel different. So if you put in a crabapple, it'll feel different than an oak. But there's social economics studies that show that trees really do make our lives better. From health-wise, our blood pressure is lower. We heal quicker from surgeries. We are calmer and happier. Those sorts of things. There's lower rates of crime in neighborhoods that have trees. Lower rates of domestic violence and lower rates of teen pregnancies, lower rates of vandalism. So, trees do a lot for a community. And yes, I've always loved trees, but the reason why I'm so passionate about trees is that I truly believe that trees build community. That when you have healthy trees in a neighborhood, that people will spend more time outside and they will feel better and make a community better, which I really think is super important. And one of my things that I do, especially since our phones are so nice these days, you can take a picture of anything you want, is I collect pictures of people using spaces differently because of trees. And one of my favorite pictures is this one. You can see there is a very nice brand new bench sitting there with a nice concrete pad under it. So your feet wouldn't even be in the grass. And where are the two kids sitting? They're sitting underneath the tree. And this isn't a one-time thing. I see it all the time. People always talk about parking, right? And I see people park all the way out to the edge of the parking lot to park under the shade and walk all the way in. To people, they have these nice bus shelters, which are wonderful this time of year with the snow, but in the summertime, you'll often see people, down a ways underneath the street tree rather than sitting in the plastic box. So I'd like to challenge each and every one of you as you're out and about, look for those. And I would guarantee that you'll find them and share them with me if you want to. I'd love that. But I truly believe that people don't see trees, they feel them. And when I have opportunities to be out in urban forests with community, there isn't anything like, people say, well, we don't want to break up the leaves and everything, but they always gravitate to standing under the trees and helping people see that connection is why I think I love my job so much, and why perhaps Dan invited me here to talk to you today, that you might all feel the same way, or maybe I could help you see that too.
And Wendy, we actually have a couple questions here in the chat.
Great.
First one here from Catherine regarding pawpaw seeds. She asks, are they toxic to people and pets, or are they just toxic to insects?
you don't want to eat them. They're really big and it would be really hard to eat them. I wouldn't purposely eat the one, and they're hard. They're pretty much impossible to eat. You would notice. They're about size of, trying to think of something, it's bigger than a quarter. So
Like an almond?
bigger than that.
Yeah.
And they're really hard. So yeah, I think you have to grind them up to get the insecticide possibility. So like when I eat pawpaws, like I'll put them in my mouth and I'll chew the flesh off. So like that won't poison you. I think you have to grind it into a powder and then purposely ingest it.
Oh gosh, I had no idea they were poisonous.
Well,
Sienna,
yeah.
a second
I think-
question here. Oh, sorry, Wendy. And I think
It's okay.
it's in regards to the pawpaw as well. Someone has asked, when's the best time to prune a pawpaw tree? And also, is that safe to do during the growing season?
Ideally, pruning happens in March, after the worst of the cold is over, but before the tree has taken the energy to make new leaves. But that said, I can tell you as an urban forester, a city crew prunes when they have time and their saw is sharp. So you can really prune anytime. Probably don't want to prune right before fruit set. So the flowers come out, I think in early June, and then the pawpaws are out in August, September. So probably if you have pawpaws for fruit reasons, you'll want to be careful about that. After the leaves fall off to March is ideal. Did I answer both parts of that?
You did. Perfect. Thank you,
Okay.
Wendy. And that's all we have for now.
Okay. All right. So the picture here is of the Ohio State Fair. Every summer I get to be Smokey Bear. If any of you have gone to the Ohio State fairgrounds, there's an ODNR park that has lots of trees, and there's a Smokey Bear there, and we get to talk to the kids about not playing with fire. And so during my lunch, I walk around, and these are trees that we planted with the governor, Kasich, and he wanted some shade on the Cardinal corridor, and there was an awful lot of pavement and no soil. And we already talked earlier about how the trees need soil. So these have a whole infrastructure built underneath the ground called silvacells. And silvacells are pretty much like big, 3 feet by 2 feet Legos that you go down deep into the ground, maybe 4 deep. They're about a foot per. And you have drainage and irrigation, and you put dirt in, and then you plant the trees in them, and then all you see, it just looks like pavement on top, like it looks like any other cutout in your business districts. But there's a whole lot going on underneath. There's green infrastructure, and that's what these have. There's a whole corridor of silvacell and soil and water, all the things trees need to grow big, all the way down. And the trees are doing great and growing like gangbusters. And you can see here on a very hot day, where is everybody? They're right there, crowded together underneath the shade of the tree. And if you look down further, there's another group and another group all the way down. I think that's pretty awesome. So we're really proud about that project. But there's all sorts of benefits about trees. And if you're interested in the science behind this, it's fascinating. US Forest Service does a lot of research on this, and it's just amazing. But trees really do make us calmer. And I think you know this. You have a bad day, you go for a walk in the woods, and you feel better afterwards. And that's the trees. It's that, people have evolved with trees, and they make us healthier. They they cool us down, help us focus. And, you know, like many communities around here, we have 260 Tree City USA communities. They're part of a group with Arbor Day Foundation, you know, that trees make our communities better. There's also a Tree Healthcare USA, and it's where hospitals, area hospitals, understand that trees help people recover quicker, and they have, you know, dedicated funds to put trees on their campuses. There's Tree Campus USA, where kids learn better, have lower rates of ADHD. They focus better when there's trees around, and so they have a program on that. Miami University is not one yet, but Xavier University just became one, and I'm also working with UD on that. So there's lots of programs out there showing that and recognizing that trees, you know, make us all, you know, better people. And I sent this out earlier, but I can send it out again if you're interested. But this is some information from the U.S. Forest Service showing that how trees make us healthier. You know, people are like, well, that doesn't sound right, but they help us reduce the amount of skin cancer because of the shade. They reduce stressful noises. They buffer sound. They decrease mental stress. So we have less mental fatigue, as well as lowers our blood pressure. They keep our air clean, lower rates of asthma in those areas that have trees. Tree-lined streets encourage people to get outside and walk and get to know their neighbors. And you know, I've already talked about this, how trees promote healing. People actually go home sooner after surgeries when they have view of green out their window. So there's lots of really, really amazing connections that are out there that are just fascinating. And if you want to know, you know, sometimes people only value things if they have a dollar amount. And so the U.S. Forest Service and Davey Tree went together to do a tree benefits calculator. And so you can take a tree that's maybe a favorite tree on campus or a tree in your yard, and you can calculate the annual economic benefit of your tree. You know, if you have a favorite, you know, this is an oak tree in the picture, and you want to know the annual benefits, how much stormwater benefits it offers, how much it pays you back, you know, was it worth the $300 you spent on it to have it planted? So it's www.treebenefits.com, and you can just put the type of tree in, how big it is, the DBH, and diameter breast height. And yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And when things love you, it's important to share the love and love them back. And you can do that by making sure you get the right tree in the right spot, and the right kind of tree in the right spot. You can see there's utility lines overhead, and these are all hawthorns, which are small at maturity. You know, there's chihuahuas that stay small. Those are the ones you can put under utility lines. And then there's Great Danes like oaks and ginkgos, and you can save those for where you don't have wires. There's young tree structure pruning, which is really important. A lot of times people don't think about pruning trees, so they're a problem and fully mature. But you can actually do some really important pruning on a tree to get a single leader, get them clearance pruned, do some good work on them. I often make the analogy, it's like having kids and teaching them manners. You start year 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and it kind of sets the tree up to be really structurally sound and stormproof, so it doesn't fail in storms. You can protect your trees, careful with your salt. You know, this time of year, we're thinking about keeping people from slipping on our sidewalks, but just remember all that salt goes into the soil and into the tree roots, and that salt pulls the water out of the tree tissue and dehydrates them and puts them into decline. So remember, roots are really important, and it's a part we forget about the most. So salt and then compaction. So don't drive over those roots. And definitely not when the soil's wet. And then encourage your friends and family to plant more trees. There is a very neat website called Tree Equity from the American Forests, and you can see rates of poverty and canopy coverage. And there's an analogy between how healthy people are and how wealthy people are by how much canopy is there. And so having more tree canopy, the goal is to have 50% canopy coverage. That's industry standard. And there's so many places here in Southwest Ohio where we're not even remotely close. Yeah, so plant more trees. And think about vertical landscaping, right? Or think about your trees in layers, not just, boom, 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 but also think about layers this way. It's really good for the trees and good for us and all our wildlife and birds and all those good things. And it's not just for your yard. You can do layered landscaping in business districts and in our towns. Having that layer landscape, is how Ohio woods are set up to be. So our trees do better that way. And that's what I have to share with you. Do you have any questions or might want to put in your chat something new that you learned? That way I can feel the love for you being my Valentine this evening. This is my email and my cell. It's an iPhone. You're welcome to send me pictures. I love tree pictures. ODNR has a great YouTube channel and Forestry has a Facebook page. I don't do those, but I do the Instagram, the Forestry Instagram and the Ohio Tree ID. And then there's my LinkedIn page if you want that. So thank you very much. It was really nice spending the evening with you, and I hope everyone learned at least one new thing about trees.
Great, Wendy. Thank you so much. And I'll be sure to post all of this information on our website as well. And a few questions here in the chat window. So Hardy has a multi-part question here, starting with, what are the 4 to 5 rarest native species of tree in Ohio, and where can you find them?
Oh gosh, I think that's a loaded question, right? Because the trees that are in Southeast Ohio are different than the trees that are in Southwest Ohio. And that's entirely different than trees up north. Gosh, I don't know. That would probably be a really great question for like DNAP people, the Division of Natural Areas and Preserves. They do cataloging of the more rare things and kind of keep track of them. But I'll give you a couple trees that I'd like to see planted more. Is that okay if I switch it a little bit there? Right now I'm doing big leaf magnolia with my Ohio Tree ID, and I'm a little bit in love with that. So I'd love to see more big leaf magnolias around. They look very tropical. They have like leaves that are like feet long and flowers as big as my head. So that's pretty cool and would happily grow here. I love to see more yellowwoods planted. They're a great pollinator tree. And I don't know, I just like the pendulous flowers. And they bloom in June when a lot of things aren't blooming. So I'd like to see more of those planted. Kentucky coffee trees. I think they're a hard sell though, because they're kind of gawky, right? When they're young, because they're bipinnately compound, which means that they have like a walnut, right? But then they have another one, right? So the leaf is huge. And when the tree loses its leaves, it just looks like someone stuck a walking stick in the ground. So they're really ugly teenagers. And so when people go to the nursery, it's really hard to talk them into buying one. But when they're big, they have this dark bark and tropical looking leaf, and just with snow on it, looks very Norman Rockwell, like immense, grandiose tree. So I love them. It just, it's hard to sell people into buying them because they are ugly teenagers. Let's see, I'm trying to think of some things in my yard that I love. Oh, larches, eastern larches. So I have a special place in my heart for deciduous conifers, dawn redwood, bald cypress, and larches. And they all grow here happily. Bald cypress are native. The other two larches are, but not this county. They're native to Ohio though. But they're really just cool trees, and I'd like to see more larches planted. Yeah. How about, was that good enough? Cucumber tree? That's another magnolia though. I have a place in my heart for redbuds. I think every single yard should have a redbud tree. I think that's why I started it out today.
Great. Yeah, and Hardy was also curious, are there any tree species in Ohio that are in danger of going extinct?
I'm sure there are. I don't deal a lot with them because I work with cities. There's trees going to extinct because of bugs, ash and chestnuts and, that sort of stress. Hemlock. We have a treatment program for the state trying to make sure we don't lose that population. But no, I don't really specialize in endangered plants that much. So I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. And the last part of Hardy's question here, does the state of Ohio deal with or have a program to fight off exotic species like the Bradford pear or invasives of that type?
We do work on state forests, but no, that usually comes under the Ohio Department of Agriculture, that sort of regulatory work. They have made it so that calorie pears will no longer be sold in Ohio, I think coming up next year. But there's no program to get rid of those things. That's on each private landowner to do themselves.
And let's see here, the next question, does Ohio have any records trees for the United States?
Like a champion tree? Yes, there's 12 of them. And I just know that the next question will be, what are they? And I don't know, but you can go to the ODNR website, to our champion tree program, and there's a list of both native and non-native champions and the county they're in. They don't tell where they are because a lot of them are on private property, and we don't want people, trespassing. A lot of times they'll publish the ones that are open, or I think there's a number of them at Spring Grove Cemetery, and they'll write on their Spring Grove Cemetery or somewhere if it's open to the public. So yeah, we have 12 national champions. And if you like big trees, there's this really wonderful Facebook and Instagram account called Big Trees Ohio, run by Mark. And they're not necessarily the absolute biggest, but they're all big, huge trees, ones that a person couldn't put their arms around. And he posts every single day, huge trees in Ohio. And it's just fascinating. So if that's your thing, you should absolutely follow Mark, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and get your big tree fix that way. When people submit trees, I get to go measure them, and you wouldn't believe some of the gorgeous trees we have here in Ohio. And then if you just want to web surf and see some beautiful trees, the national champion home is on American forests, and they have the champion tree program. They're the organization that keeps track of all the champion trees across the country. And you can just look through all the different species and see pictures, and it's really impressive. So I can tell you that Ohio has the largest Kentucky coffee tree. And for the longest time, Kentucky had the largest Ohio buckeye. So there's a little bit of a competition to keep those going. We're trying to get back the Ohio buckeye champion, I think. So if you know of any big ones, you should submit them.
And Wendy, I just put a link to the Big Tree Ohio Instagram in the chat there, if folks are interested.
Yeah, Mark does a great job.
And let's see, Noah here asked if, oh, actually a personal question. So how did you get started in, is it dendrology after college?
Oh, I took a long and winding road. Studied botany at OU, and mostly because I like trees. Like for my college graduation, my mom gave me a frame letter of me being in 4th grade, writing the governor saying we needed more trees along our highways. I still feel that way, by the way. So I've always liked trees, but my middle class parents were not too excited about me being interested in trees. You know, it's not a very common sense job. So I studied archaeobotany. I thought maybe archaeology, but I was fascinated on how our native peoples use trees and plants in the evolution of agriculture, which led me back to trees. I taught kids at like nature centers, Stratford Ecological Center, and a camp up in Michigan and Allwood. And that's really fun too. I like kids and getting kids outside and muddy. Worked out in TreePeople out in Los Angeles. It's a large nonprofit group that plants trees in the neighborhoods. I worked out in the East Coast and Longwood Gardens and Swarthmore College. So I just like plants. And when I realized there was a job where I could plant trees and get people excited about their community, I thought, oh, that's the thing for me. So if any of you want to get involved with your own community's tree program, or even just do a tree project, like call me. I love to do cool stuff. Or even if you don't want to do anything for your town, you just want to help somebody else. I'm working with the Montgomery County Land Bank to plant trees on vacant lots. We could always use a few more people there, or kill honeysuckle or something. So long and winding road. There's a few ways to go directly. I think Purdue and Stevens Point has urban forestry programs, but there aren't a lot. Hawking College has an associate's degree. But we do have a position opening here with the state. So if you know of any fabulous urban foresters, we're looking for someone great to join our small but mighty team of 6.
Awesome. And Katie asks, regarding the soil and water conservation offices, who determines what tree species that they sell?
They do. That's why different conservation counties sell different trees. Partially because what's native to their area is different. You know, Preble will be different than Hamilton, will be different than Fayette. Everyone's a little bit different. Their customers are different. Are they, you know, farmers looking for a windbreak? You'd have a different group of folks than tree board members in Cincinnati, right? So everyone's a little bit different. I get a lot of calls. A lot of them call me with their lists and say, you know, this one's a big seller. we're trying, we'd like to do this. Do you have any ideas for when people cut down honeysuckle, what they could put in its place? Because we all know that nature abhors a vacuum. Something will come back, so you have to put something else in so that the honeysuckle doesn't come back as easily. So every county's a little bit different, but there's usually a couple tree geeks there that I have a relationship with and I can call and talk with. And they're a great program. I buy trees from a lot of them all the time. Bought a rain barrel, threw one once. Yeah, like they're great. What would we do without our SWCD?
And Gail is asking if you could tell us a little bit more about the Hemlock Protection Program.
Sure, it's done through our forest health forester, Tom Macy. And, in Southeast Ohio, we have a lot of hemlock, and in Butler County, I think we have a pocket, but we really don't have a native population like they do in Southeast Ohio, where they're huge and gorgeous. So where they have found hemlock woolly adelgid, they are injecting the trees and trying to mitigate the population. It's been multiple years, and I can get you a report of where we are. And I believe last I heard we're making headway. So I'm very hopeful. It would be a shame to lose our hemlocks.
Yeah, that would be great. If you could send that report along, I'd be happy to post it on our website for folks who are interested.
Sure.
And while we're on the topic of honeysuckle, I know everybody I know fights with that. And the tendency is to really chop as much down as possible and then dump glyphosate or Roundup or something on it. In your opinion, what's the best way to really get rid of them as much as possible? I know they're very hardy and tricky to remove, but do you have any suggestions for folks who deal with those?
Tenacity. Have multiple tools in your toolbox, right? And be knowledgeable. Follow your labels, but I fight invasives year round. And honeysuckle is kind of nice. If there's a silver lining in that you can do something year round. So even in this time of year, like we're working with some UD interns to remove honeysuckle on our vacant lots so we can plant some food forestry lots in Edgemont. And so we can, we have tools in our tools. You can use Tordon with the little blue dye and the sort of mustard cap to just really focus on where to get rid of it. So you can do that now. And then there's things you can do in spring and things you can do in summer and in fall. I even seen like some really cool technology out in St. Louis where they use like a mister in the fall in that magic 2-week period where honeysuckle's green and nothing else is. And it can go like 40 feet back. It's pretty impressive. But, things like tree of heaven, which is really horrible stuff, and, spotted lanternfly and all those things to be considering, you have to kill it in August, like you can't just cut it down and put garland on it this time of year without having it spread like mad in the spring. So, you kind of have to save certain windows for certain activities that have to happen in that window. But tree of heaven is actually, I'm more worried about tree of heaven being managed and mitigated than honeysuckle, because honeysuckle you can just keep it on, but you can lose the battle with tree of heaven, and that's nasty stuff.
And I was just going to ask, I have one in my yard that I have been fighting with for over 5 years, and I just can't beat it.
So you can't use glyphosate. You have to use Garland Tordon, one of those oil-based products, and you have to do a hack and squirt in August, killing it, putting it in decline and killing it in August, and then you can cut it down. There's a playbook that you have to follow, and if you just lose your temper or your patience and you just cut it down, then I often joke it's like Mickey Mouse from Fantasia with all the brooms, and we'll just get out of control. So that, it's I'm not a big chemical person, but tree of heaven is one of those things that is completely worth doing that way. And it's very localized and very minimal product. And it doesn't impact other things. So it's important to do. With, honeysuckle, you can just keep on cutting. I know Terry Levy, he controls honeysuckle. He just puts on a pattern of 3 years. It takes 3 years to have stump sprouts, flower enough to fruit. And so if you make sure that you touch all your property every 3 years, you can keep it from getting worse. It's hard with birds to get rid of it completely, honeysuckle, but that will help it not spread through seed. So again, I have little fact sheets. If you are a visual learner and can follow directions, I can send those to you.
Great, we would appreciate that, and I'd be happy to post that on the website, because I know many people in this area fight with not only honeysuckle but tree of heaven and all sorts of other invasives.
Keep up the good fight. Keep on fighting. We'll get there. We'll just keep on going.
Sure, and a follow-up on that. A question here is if stump painting works during winter dormancy.
Not water-based chemicals. You have to use Garlon Tordon, and you have to do it within 20 minutes of cutting. But yeah, there's different tools out there for different weather and different temperatures. And I believe you have to have a pesticide applicator's license to even purchase Garlon or Tordon. So just so you know that, you're not just going to go to a big box store and buy it. You have to know what you're doing, because it's nasty stuff. And just remember, with chemicals, even though I know we're Midwesterners, but more is not better. Use exactly what the label says. And wear PPE, for personal protective equipment, because it's important to be safe.
Okay, Alex, have we asked all the questions of Wendi?
Actually, it looks like
I
we
can't
have
believe
just
everyone stayed.
we have just one more left here, Gail.
Okay.
Yeah, and Noah has asked, how common are tree hybrids in urban ecosystems?
Depends. I know anyone who knows me, I give the government depends answer a lot. If a tree has a name like autumn blaze maple, it is a clone, and it is a cultivar, and it's exactly like every single other autumn blaze out there. But there are more diversity in straight species. Oaks are very, very, I remember my professor would joke that oaks are promiscuous. There's a lot of crossing over, and it's hard to tell if you're looking at a scarlet oak versus a red oak, because, it kind of depends. So depends on where you got your trees. If you got your trees from Soil and Water Conservation District, often they're a little bit more, they're from seed stock, versus nursery, where trees have names, and those are cuttings that have been grafted. So where you buy your trees matters, and asking those questions of the nurseryman. It depends. Sorry.
All right, Gail, that looks like that's all we have here in the chat window.
Right. Well, Wendi, I want to thank you very much. It was so informative and enjoyable. As our 25 participants are also probably tree lovers, but I learned so much. I'm going to go out and look for monkey face bud scars. And it's given me more ideas for what I want to do in my yard. I had to cut down loads of ash trees. So, like you said, to make sure that you plant different levels, I'm really going to do that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, and you too, Alex, for giving us those links to champion trees and tree benefits and all that fun stuff. So this has really been great, Wendi. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, Wendi. Thanks very much.
Anytime.
And thanks for joining us, everybody. See you next month. Bye-bye.